Welcome to Graybeard Radio, where we turn wisdom into impact and income, and gurus and fakery are reviled. I'm your host, Matt Hempel, bringing you conversations with and for men 50 plus who prioritize health and longevity, relevance and meaningful work, and connection, all while leveraging the best in tools and technology. Ladies, welcome. No beard required. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Matt Hempel here, host with Graybeard Radio. Got a very special guest today. This is a gentleman that I've known for many, many years. We were in the Navy back in the day together. Back in the early 90s, we were on board the USS America in the same air wing together. He was in our sister squadron, the S3 squadron, which was right next door to us in proximity on board the carrier. And I'd like to welcome Ron Higgs. Quick bio on Ron. Ron Higgs is an executive coach and a former aerospace and defense industry leader. He transforms engineers and technical professionals into effective executive leaders who can communicate clearly, drive alignment, and build high-performing teams. Ron is a U.S. Navy veteran. Ron served as a naval flight officer and aerospace engineering duty officer and is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School, bringing lessons learned from naval aviation, complex aircraft, weapons systems, and sensor system programs and space systems to his work. As the founder and principal of Wolf Management Solutions, he draws on more than 25 years of experience in leadership, operations, engineering management, and program management, having held leadership roles in startups, small companies, and large corporations. With all of that said, welcome, Ron. Great to have you on board, and it's great to get reconnected with you after all these years, 25, almost 30 years at this point. It's unbelievable. So
Don't use the numbers, Matt. This is a long, long time ago, but it really is great to see you. Great to catch up. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. People are going to be able to do the math out there ultimately. Put things together. They're the smart people. Anyways, it's great to have you on board, and we're just going to have a fun, relaxed, laid-back conversation. We had a chance to get reacquainted or reconnected, I should say, after that amount of time, probably close to 3 decades at this point. After being together actually in Jacksonville, Florida, at the squadrons that both of us were at the time, and of course on board the aircraft carrier as well, the USS America, back in the day. And yeah, I mean, what's better than a few sea stories to kind of go back and just tell a few stories and tell a few tales of what it was like being in our mid-20s in Jacksonville, Florida, and out at sea running around the Mediterranean in the early 90s. So yeah, what do you remember about those days in particular, and kind of what's the first thing that pops into your head after we uncover, blow all the dust off of those memories, and you kind of unpack all that? What do you think about being on the boat, about being a young JO back in the day and kind of running around? And what are your main memories of that time?
Well, I mean, so much time has passed, but you know what I remember the most is I remember the fun, right? But we all remember the things that, sucked and the unpleasant times. Remember being on the ship, the USS America, which is now, an artificial reef. But I remember the temperature on board the ship being directly proportional to the temperature of the water. So when we're in the Red Sea, it's hot on the ship, right? And when we're in the Arctic, the air conditioning's working, right? So I always remember either being too hot or too cold and not comfortable. Those are the things that all kind of suck. Now I do remember that, but the flying we did. Remember when we were up in the fjords of Norway when the weather
Unbelievable.
was right, but stunningly beautiful scenery, in the fjords and getting to see all this stuff. That's the first time I ever saw the northern lights up there. So I remember that kind of fun stuff. And then remember the deployments. But I remember the times between the deployments when we all had parties, and you and I had some common friends. Remember the guys that had the pool at their house? I guess we can't say any names. Let's do call signs, EF. And then what I can't remember.
Yep.
I can't remember the one guy. I know I just don't want to say his name. I can't remember what his call sign was. But they had a great house. We all gathered at that house. We had a lot of parties at that house. And I think you came to this party. We went to deploy. We had to deploy like on December 27th or something like that.
I remember that
We were going
distinctly.
to miss New Year's. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, you know what? We're not going to miss New Year's. We're going to have a New Year's party.
Yeah.
Or something like that on December 20th or 21st or whatever it was. We had a full-blown New Year's party, New Year's Eve party. We got dressed up and everything because we knew we were going to be out crossing the Atlantic Ocean.
I remember it so distinctly. That's when we deployed for Desert Storm.
Yes.
That would have been 1991, going into 1992, if I'm not mistaken. Does that sound right? Or is that 1990 going into 91? Oh, it was 1991 to 91.
I think it was 90 going into 91. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like right at Christmas time. I think, yeah, we like day after Christmas, we flew up to Norfolk.
Something like that. So it was fun stuff like that I remember. The flying, like the beautiful scenery and flying, the things, but we worked hard. Right? Well, you know how hard we worked. I mean, we were flying at night. We had a really short turnaround between deployments and things like that, but we always found some time to have some fun. And that's what I remember the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember our home time, our domicile time, I guess what they call it, really got compressed, and we ended up doing some pretty quick turnarounds, as I remember it, especially for that Desert Storm deployment. And just going back to the ship itself, I remember, yes, I remember the temperature control, environmental control issues, definitely. But I also remember that the water constantly tasted like jet fuel, and nobody could ever figure out why. I mean, you'd shave and you'd pour a basin of water in a little basin in front of you, and there's like a sheen on top of the water where all of the jet fuel had somehow made its way into the drinking water, and you kind of had to work. I don't know. You had to work with it. It's not like there was bottled water available or anything.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I think I'm gonna have to add that to with some of my VA notes.
Yeah, unbelievable. And you got used to it, I guess. But who knows what kind of havoc that wreaked with our rot or whatever the word is with our digestive systems. Or it's a miracle more guys didn't get really sick from all that.
I don't miss, things I don't miss, standing in line to take a shower. And remember the water, it was such an old ship and some of the plumbing problems. And there's times you go for a shower, you're waiting in line and there's like no hot water. But remember there's one worse, when there was no cold water. So all of a sudden all the water is coming out it's almost boiling. It's
almost boiling.
And so it's like you can gut your way through a cold shower, but you cannot shower in 140-degree water or something like that. So all the tricks we were trying, turning a shower head upside down. So, all sorts of crazy stuff happening. And then
unbelievable. I remember one of our air crew actually had to go to medical. He got like second-degree burns because he somehow it either, I think it just suddenly went like no cold water, everything hot all at once. And he's got second-degree burns on his back. It was horrible. Talk about the ship. Yeah, the ship was, I think, commissioned in the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was a Robert McNamara era ship.
Yeah. During the Vietnam War.
There was only one more before they went nuclear. So the USS America, for those who know, CV-66, CV-67, John F. Kennedy was the last conventionally powered carrier. And then they started making nukes. And so then the USS America's fate, I can't remember what year it was. Was it early 2000s, mid 2000s, something like that? They took it out, and I think they tested a torpedo on it in Virginia, and now it's an R-50 Reef.
Yeah, they use it for all kinds of things, and it might have even been the late 90s, but not terribly important right now. No. So let's talk about the Gulf War for a second. I mean, that was our first real. I imagine it was your first, and certainly was my first real experience with like real world stuff, real world geopolitical stuff going on. And we were at the right time at the right place to get thrown into the middle of that. What do you actually remember about that trip on the way over? And, maybe a story or moment from that time period. I think we were over there engaged for a total period of maybe 4 or 5 months total. Although the war was, what was it, 100 days of official activity, action. What do you remember? What stands out to you?
There's a couple things I remember. The first is the crossing of the Suez Canal. Very unique, very challenging from the ship standpoint, right? The ship, USS, a United States aircraft carrier, one of the most powerful weapons in the world, probably at its most vulnerable state, going through Egypt in the Suez Canal. So I just remember being fascinated, the whole thing being in the canal as we were just transiting all the people in this throughout Egypt that would come out just to see it. You've got the guys knocking golf balls out into the deck of the carrier, knocking golf balls out into the Egyptian desert. That stands out as very interesting. I mean, we had to have some kind of security posture, but at the same time, we were all out there. I mean, obviously, we weren't flying, weren't doing anything, so we were able to really watch and take part in it. And I do remember that because it was something very, very unique. And then transiting through the Red Sea, as beautiful as that was, and then going over through again. Now here's the other part, is now going through the Straits of Hormuz, which is of course in the news today. And I remember the posture we had to take there, because even then it was very, very dangerous. And I remember we were on alert status. Basically, we were all sitting in the airplanes ready to go just in case something happened. And then that was the most vulnerable we were before we actually got to the Arabian Gulf. And then we were able to conduct our operations once we got further north up into the Gulf. And I remember that flying, because it's the only, we logged combat time. And that's the only time in my career that I logged combat time. So I remember that as well.
Yeah. And we did too as well. I don't remember how many hours or how many flights, but we certainly logged some. I can't remember so you were in the S3 squadron, was the S3 Viking, right?
Yes.
And which is an anti-submarine fixed wing turbofan aircraft, as I remember. And we were in the SH-3 helicopter, our squadron was. So I think going through the Suez Canal, we were either on alert or they actually had a helicopter in the air, just doing starboard delta or whatever, wherever we could find some room. But I think we were on standby for that. And then the Strait as well, or Hormuz, as you mentioned. Yeah, some pretty high tension. And I guess my most memorable event of that entire time period, number one, I remember being very ill at ease and very uncertain. And I think everybody was, maybe a little scared even, because nobody knew what to expect.
Right.
I just remember us doing remember the CBR drills? And it seemed like we were doing 2 or 3 a day on the way over, transiting the Atlantic and the Mediterranean on the way over.
We're going to have to define that for our audience, because that's painful.
Chemical, biological, radiological,
I believe.
Yeah. So basically weapons of mass destruction type of preparations, where we had just different protocols for dealing with different types of threats or vulnerabilities. And it was, the mask, and then there was just different measures that the ship would take to, clean out certain areas of the ship, or certain places we had to go to, get protection and that kind of thing. It was I don't know, the intensity with the amount and the intensity with which we were doing these drills was really kind of wearing, I think, on people.
Yeah, they didn't show that in Top Gun.
What's that?
They didn't. Excuse me. They didn't show that in Top Gun. You know how the the movies seem to skip all of the training, all of the stuff that we have to do to prepare to go out and be ready to go out and fly, right? So all of those drills and all of those things that
Yeah. Or
just don't make good movies, but it's really the
yeah.
preponderance of the things that we actually do to prep.
Like the man overboard drills in the middle of the night.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, Captain, I get the point. Okay. Unbelievable. So, yeah. So, anyways, I was just going to get to the point that that I remember that was just like overwhelming. Like, hey, I'm in the middle of this historic event, and I'm right here, smack in the middle of it, and this is truly historic. And it was the uh, in the days right before Colin Powell and the Army General. Yes, that is he's passed now.
Right. Both have.
Oh yes, they both have, haven't they? Right before they started the big swing up through Kuwait into Iraq, where they were, and what they had done is they had lined up all of these logistics and not merchant vessels, but logistics and marine landing craft, amphibious craft, and things like that. All these ships, and were just lined up in a line, had to be 10 miles long, and there had to be, I don't know how many ships, and they were all going right to the entrance of the river where all of those mines supposedly were.
Right.
And it was just all a big fake.
That's right.
It was to show Saddam and the Iraqi army that, hey, looks like these guys are going to be serious about landing here and entering here. And meanwhile, they swept up in that big sweeping arm move up on the west side. It was so I don't know. If I've ever been impressed with a display of military might, and I've been around a lot of it, as I'm sure you have, that was the time when I was definitely impressed and really almost overwhelmed. So
I agree. And I think the other thing that we have to add is this is long before we had access to so much information, meaning we had no idea what the news was saying about us out there. We had no idea if, what they were saying on the news. And there's a lot of things that, we knew because we're in the thick of it. But how long did it take for what we've done to really get what we were doing to really get out to the news? And I remember getting, weeks later, getting an issue of Newsweek or watching a recording of CNN or something like that, because at the time I think that was maybe the most popular cable network. Now, there are so many news networks out there, and you never know what you're getting now, which is too bad. But then we just didn't have all the information that we have access out to now. Like, we couldn't pull up our phones and look to see what the news was saying about what we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. It's actually a nice segue into another thing that I wanted to touch on, and that's the technology time capsule, or the technology leap. Let's go back in time. I mean, we're talking the early 90s. I mean, there weren't any cell phones. There was internet, no email, or I think email just started to come in my second deployment when I was on George Washington. That was 1996. But there's none of that. I mean, I think we had that sat phone. They had that geo sat phone that if, you could make a call if you've had a relative or a family member that passed away or was, remember that? They would grant guys access.
Inmarsat, I think it was.
Yes. That's it. But that was about it. And otherwise, it was just letters, like old-fashioned letters that you'd get in the mail call. Remember?
Yeah. And we used to live for those. That was our only communication, the letters. And it was good and bad, right? Because now with the level of communication, it's good that our fellow officers who had families, they were missing important stuff. And I think A lot of folks,
Yeah.
when you talk to them about veterans, I mean, I
Yes.
think you know this too. With every veteran, there is some level of sacrifice, right? Different levels for others, but
Sure.
at the on the low end, you've got people, you're missing birthdays, you're missing anniversaries, you're missing kids taking their first steps, saying their first words, doing those things. And now, that stuff can get recorded or FaceTime and things like that. So even though they're not there, they can see it. Those
Yeah.
our in our era,
Yeah.
they that was just missed. And I just remember my grandmother passed on one of my
Yeah.
deployments, and my mother and my mom's an only child, and she did not handle it well, and I couldn't go home. I mean, they couldn't send me from deployment home for the funeral of a grandparent. They'll send you
Yeah.
your parents path,
Yeah.
but not your grandparents. And my
Right.
mom, I think, to the day she passed, I would
Presented.
could not
Yeah.
understand why I could
Yeah.
not make it back from my grandmother's funeral, and she was devastated that I wasn't able to be there with
Right.
her during that time. And I wasn't even able to talk to her for a couple of months
Yeah.
after everything because we had to wait till we got to deployment. So I remember, once or we got a port call. I remember
Yeah. Yeah.
going on the port call, going somewhere, waiting in line at a payphone, to call my mom.
Yeah, you remember they used to have the banks of payphones in some of the better places, right? Where they actually got everything set up. So, and then you stand in line and wait your turn.
Well, remember
I
the
don't know.
locals. I mean, we would just descend on a city, and wherever the payphones were, if you were a local trying to use a payphone, forget it, because there's
Yeah,
a bunch of sailors from the USS America and the other ships that we had with us standing in line waiting to use them.
man, what a difference 30 years make. I mean,
I
it was an
know.
entirely different culture, not entirely different culture, but entirely different way of existing and communicating and relating to your family members, especially that you left back home. Um, so I mean, but yeah, that was literally 30 years ago. So I mean, so let's talk about your transition out of the Navy, Ron, and what that was like. Um, you spent how many years were you in the Navy total? 8 years total?
No, I retired. So I went to the Naval Academy Prep School, the Naval Academy, and then
Okay.
retired after I was eligible. So,
Okay.
so 24 years total, including the Naval Academy and the Naval Academy Prep School.
Oh, now did the Naval Academy? So I know that they count things
Did not
differently.
count towards my years of retirement and my pay, but I was wearing a Navy uniform that whole time, so I'm counting it.
Did it count towards? It counts towards something. It counts towards like seniority or something. There's something that time counts for, right?
No, not really. My
Not really.
time at the prep school counted because I actually had to enlist to go to the prep school. So I was,
Yeah.
so when I showed up to the Naval Academy, I had a year in, and then that
Okay.
sort of, um, but the years at the Naval Academy did not count
Yeah.
towards retirement. It didn't count towards retirement, but those were years
Right.
spent in a uniform.
Right. I'm in a similar situation in that I enlisted. So I went through the NRTC program. I was a graduate of Holy Cross up in Massachusetts, but I got waitlisted for the ROTC scholarship that eventually I was awarded. And because I didn't want to wait around the situation I was in, I decided to go ahead and just enlist and, just get out of the house and go on my way. So I enlisted in the Navy this summer, right after I graduated high school, went through the entire boot camp in Orlando, Florida in the summertime. Don't ask me what my 18-year-old brain decision-making was like at that point, but that's what I decided to do. Made it all the way through that. And like a day or two before graduation, I received a letter that I had been moved off of the wait list and did I want to accept Navy ROTC scholarship to go to school. So I found out that was okay for me to do. So I actually have some enlisted time, not a full year or 9 months like you had at the prep school, but certainly a couple of months at least. So yeah.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah. So well kept secret, all these days. So yeah. So eventually, so we got off the boat. We went our separate ways. You stayed in the Navy for a while to finish up your time so that you could officially retire. And so if you at the time, let's say when we parted ways in the mid 90s, would you have ever thought that end up being an executive management and coach, basically an executive coach for technical people, professional engineers and the like? Kind of what were you thinking? How did that whole transition take place for you?
At that time, I was dedicated to the Navy. So I was going to stay in the Navy as long as I could. Um, Let me balance that with the fact that my goal was to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an
Oh,
astronaut.
wow.
So
Okay.
I took that path. I went to test pilot school, which is, not something you can just go to, right? I applied to test pilot school.
Tough to get into, isn't it? Very
Luckily,
tough.
I was accepted, and that was to me
Yeah.
that path to become an astronaut. So I researched the path to become an astronaut. I took it. I ended up being in the test squadron for a while after test pilot school. I returned to test pilot school as a flight instructor. Um, Moved on my career, applied to be an astronaut, got to, and the way they worked it is that you had to apply to the Navy, and then the Navy decided who they wanted to be astronaut candidates, and then those packages would be forwarded to NASA. I was a astronaut candidate by the Navy, forwarded
Oh,
to
wow.
NASA, and then when I got to NASA, I was disqualified for a medical reason. So as a kid who watched Star Trek and dreamed
Yeah.
of being an astronaut and all the other science fiction movies and dreamed of being an astronaut, that kind of dream ended there. But
Man.
I got as close as I possibly could, which I can't, it's still one of the proudest moments of my life and a
Absolutely.
crowning achievement for me.
Absolutely.
Just to have sort of been in the running and getting disqualified for something over which I had no control. So that was really where my head was, and it's like, okay, there's the astronaut, there's Navy. Beyond the Navy, at that age, I couldn't see it. I had
Yeah.
no idea of what I would
Yeah.
be as in the civilian world and what my choices
Yeah.
were or anything else.
That's a pretty distant vision at that point,
Yeah.
to have anything sort of concrete. But that's something interesting that I did not know or remember about you and what you did. That you were you're a candidate in the astronaut program. Congratulations, man. That takes some cojones and it takes some big thinking, I think, to move that strongly and that resolutely in a direction
Well,
like
thank
that.
you. I don't want to move
Yeah.
backwards. This is one of the goals I had since I was a kid,
Yeah.
and it drove me to find out sort of, hey, how can I do this, especially when there was no one who looked like me on that path.
Sure.
And so I had to. So there was no one that can help me. So I'm in high school. It's like, yeah, I want to be an astronaut. Good luck. I mean, the high school
Yeah.
guidance counselors. This guy wants
Sure.
to be a what? Right? Do you know what I mean? High school guidance
Yeah.
counselors. There's nobody in my ecosystem, nobody in my family. I was the second person in my family ever to go to college. My dad was the
Yeah.
first. So it was tough. So I had to go to the library. The library is where I learned how to chart that course. And how to figure out how to apply to go to the Naval Academy, how to do all of this. And so that was uh, I was lucky. I have a fondness for the library system because of that, because it was the only tool available to me uh,
Yeah.
at that time to
Pre-internet.
find out to do what I wanted. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, that's moving backwards a little bit, but I am, I'm proud of that. But as you just mentioned, at that point in my life, as a young,
Yeah.
25-year-old guy, when we were on deployments, man, you know how it is. We were talking about this in the green room. We're
Yeah.
probably lucky to be alive. Base,
I know.
flying airplanes off of aircraft carriers, you flying helicopters, lots of moving parts there, man. And we had a loss. You experienced a loss of a helicopter in your squadron
We
while
did.
we were out training, right? And that's difficult. That's tough, and it reminds you of how dangerous of a business it really is. And so it's hard to see past that when you're in the middle of it.
Yes, and even as a 25-year-old junior officer, things that when that happens, things like that hit you smack between the eyes, and you realize that you're not as invincible or invulnerable as you think you are.
Absolutely.
And all that, anything like that could happen to you as well.
Right.
And it doesn't have to even be your fault. It doesn't have to be pilot error. Bad things happen. Things go wrong, and things that are unpredictable or unforeseeable can happen.
Yeah.
And it's just how that world works.
Well, I'll tell you this, which is probably something you don't know. That there was a defining moment for me in my life when your squadron lost that crew in the North Atlantic, because I had dinner with one of those guys that night. And I didn't know him. He was a New York Maritime Academy guy, and he went to New York Maritime with a guy in my squadron. And right before we were going to go out that night, we all sat down to dinner, and my buddy, guy in my squadron, introduced me to the guy in your squadron that we lost. And he's like, Ron, this is, yeah, like, hey, how you doing? And it's the first time I met him. I'd seen him around, but the first time we got a chance to talk, yeah. And, he talked about, having a, being married, young kid, all that stuff. And it's like, all right, man, see you tomorrow. And woke up the next morning, and the captain was on the 1MC saying, hey, we lost Dragon Slayer, X last night, and our hearts go out to the families of, and they mentioned the names. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Man, right? That was the guy I had dinner with last night. I mean, that's a defining moment for me. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Now, lots of things have happened to us, as you know, throughout our careers, but that made things real for us, right? Because wow, that was just before the Gulf War.
Yeah, it really has a huge impact on how you, and it goes beyond the safety or the risks and vulnerabilities in flying. It just makes you reassess your life and outlook on your future and your past, and it puts a lot of things into a different perspective, which I think is really important for young guys in particular, who are just, I think back to how we were. It was just balls to the wall all the time. You work hard, you play hard, you got your buddies and your squadron mates and other guys like you and the other guys from VS-32, and it was just I don't know, we were just 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old guys running around. Most of us were single, although there were some married guys in the mix, or some guys that had, more permanent relationships. But yeah, it takes that whole nary a care in the world, nonchalant approach to everything, and really makes you think twice about a lot of things.
So, again, it's hard to picture where we are now from where we were. I'm just glad to be here, as I'm sure you
Yes, I am too. And it's not just the flying part of it, like we just talked about. It's all the stupid shit I've done in my life that I should not be sitting here upright, I think, in retrospect. And my more mature, older self looks back and it's like, Hempel, what are you thinking? What's wrong with you?
How many of those started with here, pulled my beer?
Yeah. Or, hey, watch this.
Yeah. All right. I didn't mean to derail us, man. Hopefully I didn't take us too far.
Oh, no. That's really fun stuff. Hey, let's move into the executive coaching thing that you're doing now. You spent a bunch of years in the aerospace and engineering world, in that industry, and did all kinds of things, gained a lot of experience and respect in that industry. At some point, though, you decided to move on from that. What were the things that made you move on from that? And were there any kind of seminal aspects or junctures and that made you really think, hey, it's time for me to go do something different? And the reason I ask this question is very important for the Graybeard Radio audience, and a lot of the guys out there listening to this are probably or maybe in the exact same situation at juncture, maybe a little bit uncertain in the future, but maybe a little restless in the spot that you're in right now. You're looking to maybe make a change in direction, maybe a big change in direction, maybe a small change in direction. You just want to stay in your industry, but maybe take a different view or an aspect or a formulation of what you're currently doing. or maybe you want to branch out into coaching or consulting, or any kind of fractional work, anything like that. But you know that you have decades of experience under your belt and is locked up inside your head. We call that crystallized intelligence here. And it's really a part of what we like to say that we offer people, and it's what we do offer people, is the opportunity to really extract that crystallized intelligence out of your head and into a formulation, into a format that you can actually do something with, whether it's to impact the world in a little bit of a different way, or your industry in a little bit of a different way, or to maybe make some income along the way. And that's kind of what we do. So with all that said, tell us about your transition from corporate and aerospace engineering and systems engineering into what it is that you do now.
Well, kind of a long story, but what I want to focus on is, sometimes the universe conspires to set you on the right path. And I think that's really what happened to me. But the catalyst, it was kind of driven through curiosity, because all of my life I had been in really one ecosystem. 17 years old, 3 weeks out of high school, Naval Academy Prep School, 1 year. Boom, Naval Academy, 4 years, graduated from the Naval Academy, spent all my time in the Navy. Got out, and I retired, 41 years old, did a lot of what we expect good military officers to do, is work for defense contractors. So I worked in the aerospace and defense industry, worked for a couple of defense contractors. In the middle of all that, I just looked around, sort of looked at my age and went, man, I've got a finite number of years left in the workforce. Is this what I want to do? Is this what I want to? So, because I had so much curiosity about a lot of other things. So one of the things that I did, it was, I don't know anything about startups. How do people start companies? I have no idea how this is done. So I found a group. It was an angel investor group. Actually, it was just an opportunity. Somebody had come in and give a pitch. We have a Service Academies at Business Network. Somebody from this angel investor network came in and gave us a pitch on this startup, or in this angel investor group. And I went, oh, that might be a great place for me to learn about startups. So I went there, one of their meetings, loved it, joined the group, and just dove in. Somebody asked me, it's like, hey, would you like to be part of a due diligence team for this startup? I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'll try my best, and I did it. And that's how I learned. I just dove in. And through all of that, I got invited to be a part of a startup. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is different. Through that whole process and doing these due diligence reports and working in this startup, I realized and I validated the fact that my skill set is transferable, because most of my time was spent around airplanes, flying airplanes, doing engineering, as far as aircraft weapon and sensor systems. And I even did satellite systems. That's where my world is. And it's like, well, Ron, we don't have any airplanes here. We don't have these satellites here. What am I going to do? And I was able to validate that my skill set was transferable. And after a while, I took the leap without a good plan. And there wasn't, and my startup eventually didn't go anywhere, but that's okay. I learned a lot of valuable lessons from that particular startup and others that I've been involved in. And a lot of the pivots that I've made and the things that I've done are really a result of building relationships, networking, building relationships, getting to know people, people getting to know me. So for instance, when I started off as a consultant, I was kind of scrambling around for work. I found the first dollar I made as a consultant came from someone I met at a brewery on a Sunday afternoon while I'm wearing shorts and flip-flops.
Really?
We just started talking. Actually, I take that back. My wife started talking to his wife, and then he and I started talking.
It happens that way a lot.
Guy reaches out to me a week later and says, hey, how'd you like to be my consultant for, X? I'm like, okay, I'm in. much longer story, but I'll just tell you that was the first dollar that I made as a consultant. And then now I have another guy that I had as a roommate at the Naval Academy. He runs a consulting company. He calls me and goes, "Hey, you got any bandwidth? I need some help with a project." Boom. Did some work for him. So things just started going along. And then again, more networking. Finally, I got an offer. Somebody says, "Hey, I know a guy looking for a COO of his company, and I think you'd be the perfect guy." Boom. It worked out. So I ended up becoming COO of that company, and the universe hit me again. It's called COVID. So, so I had the COO job for a very, very short period of time. COVID hit. I got laid off. I got let go, and then boom. So I had to restructure my business. That's how I ended up as a fractional COO. And believe it or not, as a COO, one of the things that I have a master's in systems engineering. I used my knowledge of systems engineering and looked at the company as a system and all the operating functions of the business as parts of that system. And I was able to be successful as a COO by just comparing it to an engineering system. So I did the fractional COO work for a while, and then I did a lot of coaching of people during my COO. And I found that I like this more because, business, some of the COO stuff can be, let's call it draining. And I enjoyed it, but I found that I enjoyed the coaching more. And was like, you know what, I'm going to step out of this. And I think I'm going to move into some full-time coaching. And I chose to work with engineers and technical professionals, one, because I am one. I got a lot of experience working with engineers and technical professionals. And I also think that there's a gap. I think that a lot of leadership development programs are not made for engineers. Why? Highly logical, mostly introverted, right? And people, and then people are anything but. And so the reasons they get promoted, because they're good engineers, lots of attention to detail, perfectionists, things like that. Those are the things that work against them in leadership. So, and quite frankly, it's also to separate myself from all the other coaches out there. There are a lot of coaches out there, so I have to break my needs and separate myself somehow, and that's how I did it.
So that's really, really interesting and informative stuff. So what, in your opinion, what has been the biggest challenge, and what are a couple of big successes that you've had in the fractional / coaching world so far?
So the challenges, of course, is that I am a solopreneur. It's just me. I'm out by myself trying to scare up business, trying to do anything I can to do business. A combination, referrals, networking, LinkedIn, all of that stuff. It really is tough to find clients out there. The big successes all have to do with people and the impact that I've had and the challenges that I've helped them overcome. And it's all worth it. And I'll give you one example. I was doing an executive team coaching where I coached the entire team, and we were at an offsite. And I take the executive team through an exercise. And at the end of the day, asking everyone to reflect on their takeaways and what they got most out of the day and all of these other things. And one of the executives stood up and said, he goes, "I realized that, there's a lot of issues that I'm dealing with right now. And I just realized that they're all my fault. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't communicate this, and everything." And one, it was very brave of him to admit that, but it also validated the fact that, hey, I added value to this group, and I really did have an impact to this group. And that guy is reached out, and I concluded my contract with that company about a year and a half ago. And every once in a while, I still hear from that guy. And as far as thanks for thanking me for making him a better leader. And that was that was in a group context. I didn't have much time. I didn't coach them individually. I just coached them as a group. I had a couple of conversations with him one-on-one. But to have that kind of impact on people, I think makes it well worth it.
Yeah, making a difference. And I think really for a lot of guys that will be find this podcast and this series of podcasts really interesting here at Graybeard Radio is having that level of impact makes all the difference. You know, you're 61 years old or however old you are, I'm just saying in general for the typical listener out there, you've had a relatively successful career. Maybe you're looking to move on to something else and you find yourself wanting to go into coaching or consulting or online education or any kind of digital fractional leadership position type of thing. And ultimately, maybe at this point, it's not really about the money quite as much as feeling like, hey, I'm not going to spend the last decade of my professional efforts here on the planet, driving around in a golf cart, playing golf and drinking beer all day. I'm going to be making a difference in people's lives, and I'm going to be doing something that has impact and relevance and influence and is actually going to help the world and help other people out. And I think ultimately for those of us that really care about these kind of things, it's ultimately, sorry, my dog is making noise. I'll be right with you. Give me 10 minutes. We're going to wrap up shortly. Sorry for all the podcast audience, and we can edit that out if we need to. But this is my Wiesla mix that is giving me Wiesla noises right now. She has 3 legs, but she definitely has all of the Wiesla attributes. So anyways, just to wrap up that thought, I just really think that putting ourselves in a position at this stage of our late career situation or early retirement, something like that, and you just got her tail is all there in the corner. Thank you, Ruby, for your contribution this afternoon. For those people that still want to make a difference, this is the right place to be. And these are the types of topics that we talk about. So we're drawn towards the end of our talk here. I was just going to ask you really quick about the marketing piece and the client acquisition piece. So obviously you're a very personable guy, Ron, and, we've known each other for years. We haven't really been in contact for a large period of that until recently, but I just remember even back in the day, everybody knew Ron knew everybody, and you're a personable guy. What, for guys that are out there that may want to pursue a similar situation professionally for themselves, late career, early retirement, what are some, but they're not maybe as outgoing, they're not as personable, they're not as comfortable with the networking aspect of really kind of what it takes. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how those individuals with that personality profile might operate successfully in this world of fractional coaching and consulting?
Yeah, start slow, because it's something I believe you have to do. And here's why. Opportunities do not normally just drop out of the sky. Opportunities are attached to people, right?
Yeah.
So you have to know people in order to find those opportunities. You're flying CJ2 pluses now. Did you answer an ad? Or was it somebody that did it? And even if you're a pilot, and my wife's son was working on becoming a pilot himself, and this is something I'm trying to work him on. You see those guys flying movie stars around, flying rich people around, positioning airplanes, doing all these things that you think is really cool. Yet you've never seen a job advertisement for such, and you never will. You know why? Because those jobs are based on who you know. And you got to get out there, and you got to get to know people. You got to network. You got to let people get to know you before those opportunities become available. So in terms of networking, even if you are an introvert, not afraid, you could go into one of those things and talk to one person. That's it. Make it a goal. You know what? I'm going to come out with one person. I'll make a good connection with one person, a business card, whatever it is. And just be honest about what it is you are, what it is you're looking for. And if you're exploring, if you can find through that networking, if you can find people who have been exactly where you are, those are the people that can help you the most. Because inevitably, you'll run into somebody that says, wow, I was just in your position 2 years ago. Here's what I did. The more of those people you find, the more of those stories you see, the better it'll be for you. And people really love to help other people, at least in this circle. I
Yeah.
have answered emails from, and people reach out on LinkedIn, especially people with which we have something in common. If somebody's an Academy
Yeah.
grad, a Navy person, another veteran, whatever, it's like, hey, Ron,
Yeah.
I'd love to get into your space. Do you just have a few minutes for me to pick your brain about this? Absolutely, I do. And I'm happy to help. And so there are a lot of people out there that are really happy to help. And you don't have to introduce yourself to everyone in the room. You don't have to stand up and do anything you don't want to. Just take it
Yeah.
slowly and maybe just focus on coming out of that network with
Yeah.
one connection, because ideally you want to learn enough about the person at a networking event to see if it's worth a continuing conversation
Yeah.
and
That's
offer help first. First thing I
yeah.
do is ask, it's like, how can I help you? Really understand why they are there and what
Yeah.
they're looking for, and then ask them to help. And I'll end
Yeah.
with this. I have 3 daily goals that I still have, right? So my daily goals are to meet someone new, to learn something new, and help someone every day. I don't always do it, but those are the goals. And so if you can create your goals, whatever they are, as you're walking into these situations, that'd be a great place to start.
No, that's really good advice. And I really like that. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember a quote by
You don't have to. We recorded
famous philosopher. Yeah, you're right.
it.
Famous philosopher and life guru Ron Higgs once said, all opportunities are connected to people. I like that. I like that a lot. That's really good. And, as one of those people, I think that in many professional circles throughout my career, and many times I've been that introvert, just haven't dug the whole networking thing. And because I was looking at it the wrong way, I was looking at it. I work with a bunch of salespeople mostly, and salespeople are great, but they can be at networking events, they can be very transactional and very much, what can you do for me? Nice to meet you. My name's, whatever. It just very transactional and self-focused. And that's what kind of turned me off about networking. But I've kind of learned much in the way that you're describing now of number one, forcing myself. And I don't have to force myself anymore, but for a while I did, to introduce myself to random strangers in situations where I never in my wildest dreams would have ever thought about introducing myself to anybody in situations, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I do now, though, and it's made a huge, huge difference. Made a huge difference in a number of different ways. It's made a huge difference in my quality of life and the number of connections. And these are authentic, genuine connections that I have with people that I didn't before. And there's nothing transactional about it. And it's really actually quite a healthy thing to do. So that's a nice way of segueing into, if that's a word, segueing into our last couple of questions here. These are signature questions for the Graybeard Radio podcast, Ron. And it has to do with advice to your 25-year-old self. We've talked a little bit about this so far, but if you could kind of put a bow on that and wrap that up, what are a couple of things that you would go back and say to your 25-year-old self now that you've got a good amount of time under your belt between then and now?
Well, probably not the answer you want, Matt, but one, we all know that's not possible. Number two, I don't think my 25-year-old self would have listened. So, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, because I just remember a couple of times, like talking to my grandfather, and like he was trying to give me advice, but I guess I didn't know it. And I just wanted to really learn more about him than taking his advice, because I knew he wouldn't be there for the most part of my life. Right. But
Sure.
here's the one piece of advice I would really give myself and anyone out there, is to find a mentor. I mean, somebody that's a few steps ahead of you, living the life that you respect. And what I've noticed is that all of our fellow junior officers who went on to be very successful, even to be captains, admirals, and so forth, they all had mentors. They all had other senior officers that mentored them. I never had a mentor, Matt, never.
Yeah.
Still haven't to this day. And so I believe that had I had a mentor, my career in the Navy would have gone further. And
Yeah.
so the one piece of advice, what I would say is like find a mentor and listen and learn from that mentor. Because how did you learn if you wanted to be a successful in the Navy? It's like, here's what you want to do if you want to be a CO. Well, that's a commanding officer of a squadron. So that's not written down anywhere. So how do you find that out?
Yeah.
So nobody told me. I didn't have a mentor that told me that path. You know what I was doing? I was listening to our peer junior officers who were being mentored, and
Yeah.
that's what they were being told.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no one
Yeah.
ever told me that.
Interesting. I had the exact same experience from the perspective of in the Navy world, from the perspective of no mentor and really very little information flowing down or good information flowing into towards me or towards any of the other JOs, junior officers that we were with about, okay, if you want to go this far, these are the things that you need to, if you want to be here in 10 years, this is what you need to think about now.
Right.
If you want to be here in 15, 20, 25 years, these are the things you need to think about now, because I look at it and it's a matter of, I think it's geometry is, so you're starting out at a point where you are now, and the further that you get off track, even if you're off track just a little bit as a junior officer, by the time you make it 15, 10, 12, 15 years down the road, your gap between where it is that you want to be and where you should be is this wide, even though when you started, it was very, very small. And so those small things as a junior officer seem to make, in retrospect, now that I look back, make a huge, huge difference. It makes the difference between being, ranked pretty highly among your peers or not doing as well. Some of it has to do with, paying homage to the management and to the department heads and the CO and the XO and, kissing the ring and doing all those
playing
things. Playing the game, being a little political. And I was not very good at that as a junior officer. I'll readily admit that. But maybe a few adjustments back then, for myself at least, I feel like probably would have made a huge, huge difference down the road. Not that I regret anything at this point. I'm grateful to be
even
alive.
if you do, oh well, right? I mean, you can't go back and relive it. Exactly. Again, the whole mentor thing, and really, I think that would have made a big difference in my career.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let's go ahead. I think we're getting towards the end here. If somebody wanted to connect with you, Ron, first of all, maybe tell us a little bit more, anything that you didn't cover about Wolf Management Solutions and what it is that you offer and the types of clients that you look to work with, the right fit, the right alignment for what it is that you have to offer, and anybody that wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that? Go ahead and just pitch us a little bit on what you're doing.
Well, I transform engineers into effective leaders. I like working with those who are highly technical that are having challenges moving into leadership. And we touched on this before. All of the things that make us good engineers are the things that hold us back in leadership roles. And we have to there's some mindset shifts that need to be made. And I help people work through those. I also like working with executive teams as a whole, as I mentioned, so executive team coaching. And I also have some advisory roles. I'm an advisor to a couple of startups and things like that. So if they're just looking for advice, I have been a COO, I have done operations, I have done sales and marketing. There are a lot of things that I have done. And so taking on an advisory role for a startup or a smaller company, I enjoy doing that as well. You can find me. LinkedIn is my primary channel. I post regularly on LinkedIn. I monitor LinkedIn daily. And so that's a great place. My website is okay. It's not the best website out there, but it is a way to, I've got some free downloadable content there. And it is a way to get in touch with me and schedule a time. If you'd like to see, if you'd just like to chat. I am primarily interested in helping people achieve their goals, even if that does not involve me. So I spend a lot of time with people really trying to figure out what their problems are. The second part is seeing, am I the right person to help you with your
Yeah.
problems? But through all the networking, as I told you, I've created a lot of relationships. I know a lot of people who do the same thing that I do and maybe work in different capacities. So I've always prided myself in going, I'm not the right person for you,
Yeah.
but my colleague Matt Hempel here, that is his sweet spot. Let me refer you. And so
Yeah.
I have worked with a few referral partners, and those partners do the same for me. So if you're
Yeah.
looking, if you want to know more about coaching, you want to understand the value of coaching, anything, always happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. And it's Ron Higgs, Higgs. You can find Ron on LinkedIn, as he mentioned, and that's where we reconnected after probably 25 years in the wilderness. Not in the wilderness, but you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
I'll tell you guys, we got back on the phone together. We got on like a Zoom meeting like this. We had such a nice time reconnecting, just telling some stories. It's like we were 25-year-old kids again, running around doing all the stuff we used to do, and just, bringing up some old names and we used to hang out. It was so much fun. I love doing stuff like this.
Yeah,
So that's
we're gonna have to find some more of our old air wing buds and reconnect. You've inspired me to reach back out and try to find a couple guys to say hi, see what they're doing.
Yeah. And maybe we could do a regular standing meeting, or maybe even a podcast, call it the O Club. Friday afternoon. What do we have? We have happy hour at the O Club. I don't even remember. All I remember is Friday afternoon rolled around and we all headed over to the O Club. It's good times.
Yeah, we had our days, and then remember in Jacksonville, we had our days. If we were back, if we were not deployed,
Yeah,
not super busy, where we could actually have a normal work day. It was like, hey, on Monday night, it's this place. So we go for half on Tuesday, or, we watch football,
yes.
Monday night football in this place. On Tuesday nights, we go do this. On Wednesday night, every night of the week had something.
We had a battle rhythm going.
Yeah,
right.
We absolutely did.
There's a regimen. What was Nickel Beer Night? I forget where that place was and what night it was, but there was actually Nickel Beer Night.
Quarter Beer Night. I don't think we're that old to have Nickel Beer Night. But
was it Quarter Beer Night? I thought it was Nickel Beer Night. One of those places right along the main drag there on the west side of the river. I don't know, a long time ago, obviously. Nickel Beer Night. Yeah. It was like ancient.
I don't remember.
Ancient history, ancient times.
Right.
Well, thank you, Ron Higgs. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here at the Graybeard Radio. Fascinating stuff. Great story, great storytelling, and we wish you all the very best with Wolf Management Solutions, your pursuits there. And have a great day, everyone. We will see you next time.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
All right. Take care.